They told me to stop calling. They didn't shout it. They didn't say it with anger. They said it the way people say things when they've already made up their minds. Mom, we have our own lives now. I remember sitting at my kitchen table when those words came through the phone, the late afternoon light slanting across the floor, dust floating in the air like it always had. My hand stayed wrapped around the receiver long after the line went quiet. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't ask what I'd done wrong, I just said, all right. My name is Evelyn Carter, I'm 72 years old. And until that moment, I believed that no matter how busy my children became, no matter how far life carried them, I would always be their mother first, not an inconvenience, not an interruption. But that day, something changed. It was Mother's Day when Daniel came to see me. He arrived exactly at 3 p.m. like he always did when he came at all, dressed sharp, pressed shirt, calm, confident. The same careful composure he used in boardrooms and meetings. He hugged me politely, not tightly, not the way he used to when he was a boy. We sat across from each other at the table where his father, Thomas, once carved roast chicken every Sunday. Daniel folded his hands and looked at me the way someone looks at paperwork. Mom, he said gently, are you happy with the money you get each month? The question landed heavier than he intended. I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I knew what it would reveal. The church has been helping me survive, I said quietly. The room fell silent. That's when the front door opened, and Rachel walked in, perfect hair, neutral smile. Phone already in her hand. She didn't notice the stillness at first. She rarely noticed what didn't involve her schedule. Oh, she said, glancing between us. You're already talking finances? That was the moment I realized something important. This visit wasn't about me. Before I continue, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from today? Leave it in the comments. Sometimes knowing someone else is out there makes these stories feel less lonely. I raised 3 children. Rachel, the eldest, organized, efficient, always 5 steps ahead and 5 miles away emotionally. Daniel, the middle, practical, assertive, believed problems existed only to be solved quickly and quietly. And Lena, my youngest. Soft-spoken, distant, the kind who avoided conflict by disappearing. After Thomas passed, they promised they'd be around more. They were, at first. But grief fades faster for the young than it does for the ones left behind. After the funeral, the calls slowed. Weekly became monthly. Monthly became when things settled down. I told myself this was normal. Children grow up. They build lives. Mothers learn to wait, so I waited. I filled my days with church volunteering, quiet mornings, and conversations with my neighbor Helen Brooks, who checked on me more often than my own children did. Still, I called, not to complain, not to ask for money, just to hear their voices, and eventually that's when they told me to stop. The call came on a Tuesday evening, all 3 of them on the line. A family conversation, Rachel had called it. Daniel cleared his throat first. Mom, we need to talk about boundaries. Boundaries. I smiled at the word even though they couldn't see it. Rachel followed. You call a lot, and when you do, it's usually because you're lonely or worried. Lena said nothing at first. I waited. I just want to know, I said carefully, if something happens to me, can I count on you? Silence. Then Daniel spoke. Mom, you're healthy, you're financially secure, you don't need us hovering. You need to live your own life. Rachel added, we love you, but you can't keep calling us every time you feel alone. And Lena, sweet Lena, finally said, we just don't want you depending on us for emotional support anymore. That was when Daniel said it. The sentence that rearranged everything. Mom, stop calling us, we have our own lives. I didn't argue. I didn't remind them of scraped knees, school plays, or hospital nights. I didn't mention how Thomas died in front of me or how quiet the house became after. I simply said, all right. And I meant it. The next morning I woke up early. Not with anger, with clarity. I brewed my tea, I fed the birds. I sat at the same table where I had once felt dismissed, and I thought, they wanted me independent, so I would be. But independence, I realized, didn't mean disappearing. It meant choosing who had access to me. That's when I made the call, not to my children, to Arthur Lowell, my lawyer, the man who had handled Thomas's estate, the man who believed silence could be strength if used correctly. Arthur, I said when he answered, I'd like to review my will. There was a pause, then he said, of course, Evelyn, come in this afternoon. 3 days later, life went on as if nothing had changed. My children didn't call, I didn't either. Weeks passed, then months. And just when I thought the quiet had settled for good, when I believed they had truly moved on, I heard a sound at my gate. 3 cars, familiar ones, Rachel, Daniel, Lena. They stepped out smiling. Like nothing had ever changed, like they were still welcome. They had no idea what one quiet call had set in motion, and they certainly didn't expect what happened next. They told me to live my own life. They just didn't realize how seriously I would take them. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Helen, not the women at church, certainly not my children. After I met with Arthur Lowell, I went back to my routine as if nothing had shifted. Same morning tea, same birds at the feeder, same quiet house that had learned how to hold silence without echoing it back painfully. But inside me, something had steadied. Arthur had listened without interrupting. That alone felt unfamiliar. "You're not angry," he said after I finished explaining. "You're resolved." "Yes," I told him. "I'm tired of explaining my worth." We spent hours going through documents. My will, the house. The accounts Thomas and I built over decades of careful living. Arthur asked questions no one had asked me before. "What do you want your life to look like now?" Not "what do you want to leave behind?" Not "how do you want to divide things?" But now. I left his office lighter than I had in years. At home, the answering machine blinked. No messages. I realized something quietly terrifying and freeing at the same time. If I disappeared tomorrow, it might take days before they noticed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because memories kept lining up, demanding to be acknowledged. Rachel at 12, slamming her bedroom door because I wouldn't let her stay out late. Daniel at 16, insisting he didn't need help with college applications. Lena at 22, hugging me quickly before rushing out the door, already half gone. I had mistaken independence for maturity. I had mistaken silence for peace. The next morning, I didn't call anyone. That was new. By noon, my phone was still quiet. By evening, I expected irrationally that someone might check in. They didn't. I sat on the porch with Helen, watching the sun slide down the sky. "You're quieter than usual," she said gently. "I'm listening," I replied. "To what? To what happens when I stop reaching?" Helen nodded. She didn't press. She was good like that. Days turned into weeks, and that's when the pattern emerged. Daniel called first, not to ask how I was. "Mom," he said briskly, "Arthur Lowell called me. He said you're reviewing estate documents." I smiled into the receiver. "Yes," I said, "I am." There was a pause. "Is something wrong?" "No," I replied. "Something's clear?" He laughed lightly, the way people do when they assume they're still in control. "Well, just let us know if you need help understanding things. These things can be complicated." I almost thanked him, almost. Rachel texted 2 days later. "Hey Mom, Arthur mentioned changes. Everything okay?" I typed, deleted, retyped. "Everything's fine." She didn't reply. Lena was the last. She called late one evening, her voice soft, uncertain. "Mom, are you upset with us?" I closed my eyes. "No," I said truthfully, "I'm adjusting." "To what?" "To living my own life." She didn't know what to say to that. The house felt different after that, not lonelier, clearer. I moved photographs. I boxed old school trophies. I donated clothes I no longer wore. Each small act felt like reclaiming space. Then one afternoon, Arthur called. "Everything is finalized," he said. "The trust, the updates. The security measures." Security. I hadn't told them about that part. 2 days later, Rachel showed up, no call, no warning, just her car in the driveway like it still belonged there. She rang the bell sharply. I opened the door halfway. "Oh," she said, surprised, "you're home?" "I live here," I replied. She smiled tightly. "We should talk." "We are." She stepped forward. I didn't move. Her eyes flicked past me, scanning the house like she was checking inventory. "Daniel's worried," she said. "You've been distant." I met her gaze. "You asked me to be." Her mouth tightened. "That's not what we meant." "It's what you said." Rachel sighed, frustration slipping through. "Mom, we just don't want you making decisions out of loneliness." I laughed softly. That startled her. "These decisions," I said calmly, "are the least lonely ones I've ever made." She frowned. "You're shutting us out." "No," I said, "I'm stepping back." "That's the same thing." "It's really not." She left annoyed, not concerned, annoyed. That night, I checked the security app Arthur helped me set up. Cameras, alerts, authorized access list. 3 names were missing. Rachel, Daniel, Lena, not out of spite, out of accuracy. I slept better than I had in years. But the quiet didn't last. Because when people realize they're losing access, they don't reflect, they react, and they almost always show up pretending nothing has changed. I would hear their cars before I heard their apologies. And this time, I wouldn't be standing alone at the door. By the third week after that phone call, the silence had settled into something heavier than loneliness. It wasn't absence anymore, it was confirmation. I'm Evelyn Carter. I've lived long enough to know the difference. When you're young, silence feels like punishment. When you're older, silence feels like information. Rachel didn't call, Daniel didn't text. Lena didn't send even one of her carefully neutral messages filled with emojis and distance. The kind that said everything without saying anything at all. They had told me to stop calling, so I did. What surprised me wasn't how quiet my phone became. It was how quickly my body relaxed once I stopped waiting for it to ring. I still woke up early like I always had. Old habits don't die just because your children do. I brewed my coffee at 6:10 exactly as Thomas used to like it. 2 scoops, never 3. He believed excess dulled discipline, even in coffee. Thomas Carter had been a man of structure, lists, ledgers. Calm decisions made without audience or apology. He used to say, "Evelyn, if people underestimate you, let them. It gives you time to move quietly." At the time, I thought he was talking about business. I didn't realize he was talking about family. The first thing I did wasn't dramatic. I didn't cry. I didn't write letters. I didn't call anyone to complain. I opened the folder Thomas had labeled Foundations. Inside were copies of everything: the deed, the insurance policies, the retirement accounts, the trust documents he'd drafted but never finalized. He believed in preparation more than assumption. I sat at the dining table for hours, reading without emotion, without rush. Numbers don't hurt you the way people do. Numbers are honest. And the numbers told me something my children never had. I was not dependent. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me precise. The next call I made wasn't to Rachel, Daniel, or Lena. It was to Arthur Lowell. Arthur had been our attorney for over 30 years. He'd watched Thomas build the estate carefully, never quickly, never loudly. When Arthur answered, his voice was the same as always, steady, uncurious, respectful. "Evelyn," he said, "it's been a while." "Yes," I replied. "And that's why I'm calling." There was a pause on the line. Arthur knew better than to rush a woman who hadn't called unless it mattered. "I'd like to review my estate," I said, "not emotionally, structurally." That earned another pause. "Then when would you like to come in?" "Tomorrow morning." At his office, nothing had changed. Same shelves, same law books no one reads but everyone trusts. Arthur didn't ask about my children. He didn't ask why now. He slid a legal pad toward me and said, "Tell me what you want protected." Not who, what, that mattered. "I want my home protected," I said, "my autonomy protected, and I want clarity, not comfort." Arthur nodded slowly. "And your children?" I didn't answer immediately. "They've asked me to stop calling," I said finally. "I intend to respect that." Arthur's pen stopped moving. "I see," he said quietly. "Then we'll proceed accordingly." We spent 3 hours reviewing every asset: the house, the accounts, the investments Thomas had set aside for long-term security, not short-term generosity. Arthur explained options, trust structures, irrevocable clauses, conditions that couldn't be undone once set. "This isn't punishment," he said carefully, "but it is final." "I'm aware," I said, so were their words. By the time I left his office, nothing had been signed yet. But the direction was clear. Boundaries aren't loud, they're deliberate. On my way home, I stopped by the grocery store, not because I needed anything, because I wanted to move through the world without waiting for permission. That's when I ran into Mrs. Helen Brooks. She was struggling with a bag of oranges, insisting they weren't too heavy while clearly proving they were. I took them from her without asking. "You didn't have to," she said. "I know," I replied. "That's why I did." We sat on her porch afterward. No agenda. No questions about my will, no subtle concern disguised as advice. She just asked how I'd been sleeping. That question almost undid me, not because it was dramatic, because no one else had asked. "You know," Helen said, stirring her tea, "people think independence means isolation. It doesn't, it just means choosing who gets access." I looked at her then, really looked. She'd shown me more care in 10 minutes than my children had in months. That night I made one more call. Marcus Reed answered on the second ring. Thomas had trusted him years ago, back when neighborhood break-ins were becoming common. Retired police, quiet presence, no unnecessary force. I need a consultation, I said. Security, boundaries, prevention. Marcus didn't ask why. He said, I'll be there tomorrow. By the time I went to bed, I hadn't cried once, but something had shifted. My children thought silence would weaken me. What it did instead was give me space to prepare. And somewhere, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the moment I stopped explaining myself and started deciding who would be allowed to knock on my door when they finally remembered where I lived. The first thing Marcus Reed did wasn't walk the perimeter. He stood still in my driveway and listened. Most people don't notice that. They rush to point out cameras, locks, angles. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, as if the house itself might tell him something if he gave it a chance. Your home's quiet, he said finally. That's good. Quiet tells you when something doesn't belong. I nodded. Thomas would have liked that answer. Marcus had the posture of a man who never needed to raise his voice to be taken seriously. Retired police, yes, but more than that, he understood restraint. He didn't talk about danger like it was inevitable. He talked about it like it was preventable. We walked the property slowly. Front gate first, side yard, back fence. He asked simple questions. Who has keys? My children, I said. Or at least they did. Codes? They've never needed them. He stopped walking and looked at me directly, not with judgment, with clarity. Evelyn, he said, needing and having access are two different things. That afternoon, we changed everything. Locks, codes, access points. A discreet camera system, not flashy, not obvious. The kind that didn't announce itself but remembered everything. As Marcus worked, I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, watching a man methodically protect a space that had slowly stopped feeling like mine. It was strange, not sad, just overdue. When he finished, he handed me a small card. If anyone shows up uninvited, he said, you don't explain, you don't negotiate, you call me. What if it's my children? I asked. Marcus didn't hesitate, especially then. That night I slept deeply. No dreams, no replaying conversations, just rest. The next morning my phone rang. Rachel. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be intentional. Hello, I said. There was a pause, then her voice, carefully measured, polite, controlled. Mom, we need to talk. Not how are you, not I'm sorry, we need to talk. I'm listening, I said. Daniel's voice joined hers immediately, sharper, impatient. We've been discussing some things about the future. I could almost hear Lena in the background, silent but present as always. I'm sure you have, I replied. Rachel exhaled. Mom, we're concerned, you've been distant. I almost laughed. You asked me to stop calling, I said calmly. I respected that. That's not what we meant, Daniel snapped. You're taking things too far. Too far, not calling them, not chasing them, not begging. Interesting how boundaries always feel extreme to people who benefit from your lack of them. We were thinking of coming by this weekend, Rachel continued, just to check on you like old times. Old times when I cooked, when I listened, when I didn't ask for anything back. I won't be available, I said, silence. Daniel spoke next, his tone turning hard. Mom, this is ridiculous, we're your children. Yes, I said, you are. So open the door, he said, stop being dramatic. There it was, that familiar word, dramatic. The favorite label of people who don't want to look at their own behavior. I'm not being dramatic, I said, I'm being clear. Rachel's voice softened, practiced. Mom, you're alone. You shouldn't be making decisions like this by yourself. I smiled slightly. I've made every important decision in my life by myself, I said, including raising you. The call ended abruptly, not with resolution, with irritation. 2 days later, Marcus called me. They've been driving past the house, he said, slowly, not stopping, just watching. I felt no fear, only confirmation. Thank you, I said. Keep me informed. That afternoon, I visited Arthur Lowell again. This time we signed the trust, the revised will, the protections Thomas had always intended, finalized at last. Arthur looked at me over his glasses. Once this is filed, Evelyn, there's no undoing it. Even reconciliation won't change the structure. I understand, I said. Reconciliation requires effort from both sides. Preparation only requires clarity. He nodded. You're not cutting them off, you're cutting off entitlement. Exactly. That evening, Mrs. Helen Brooks came over with a small loaf of bread she'd baked herself. "I saw unfamiliar cars this week," she said gently. "I wanted to check on you." I poured us tea. "I'm fine," I said, "better than I've been in a long time." She squeezed my hand. Sometimes people only notice your value when they realize access has changed. As if summoned by those words, my phone buzzed again. A message from Lena this time. Short, careful, "Mom, can we talk? Just you and me." I stared at it. For years, Lena had avoided responsibility by staying quiet, letting her siblings speak, letting me absorb the consequences. I typed a response slowly. "I'm listening when you're ready to be honest." The typing dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. No reply. I set the phone down. Outside, the porch light flickered on automatically as dusk settled in. A small thing, but symbolic. The house was learning my rhythms again, and somewhere I knew my children were realizing something too. They thought telling me to live my own life would scare me. What it did instead was teach me how peaceful it could be when I finally did. And I had a feeling that when they showed up next time, it wouldn't be for conversation. It would be for access. And that was one thing I was no longer willing to give. They didn't call before they came. That's how I knew they still didn't understand. I was in the kitchen mid-morning, slicing apples the way Thomas liked them, thin, even, no rush, when my phone vibrated on the counter. Not a call, an alert. Motion detected at front gate. I didn't move right away. I finished the slice I was on, set the knife down, washed my hands. Then I picked up the tablet Marcus had set up and opened the camera feed. 3 cars. Rachel's SUV first, parked too close to the gate like she still believed proximity meant permission. Daniel's truck behind it, angled aggressively, as if intimidation might unlock something. Lena's sedan off to the side, engine still running. They stood there together the way they used to at school performances or graduations, united when it suited them. I felt nothing, not anger, not sadness, just distance. Rachel pressed the gate keypad. Once, twice. Daniel tried next, punching in a code I recognized immediately. The one Thomas and I had used years ago before he passed. Before the house stopped feeling like a shared space and started feeling like a future asset to them. The keypad blinked red. I watched Daniel's jaw tighten. Rachel turned toward the camera, finally noticing the small black lens near the pillar. She waved at it once sharply, then leaned in close. "Mom," her voice echoed through the intercom. "Open the gate." I pressed the button calmly. "No," I said. There it was again. Silence, the kind that follows disbelief. Daniel stepped forward. "This isn't funny," he said. "We drove all the way out here." "I didn't invite you," I replied. Rachel's tone shifted instantly, controlled, coaxing. "Evelyn, please, we just want to talk. This is getting out of hand." "You told me to stop calling," I said. "I did, now you're here unannounced." Lena finally spoke, her voice thin through the speaker. "Mom, you're embarrassing us." That one almost worked. Not because it hurt, but because it reminded me how often I'd bent myself smaller to avoid making them uncomfortable. "I'm not responsible for your embarrassment," I said. "I'm responsible for my peace." Daniel moved toward the gate again. He rattled it once, harder than necessary. "You can't keep us out," he snapped. "We're your children." I didn't raise my voice. "This is my property," I said. "And you're trespassing?" Rachel laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "Listen to yourself, you sound like a stranger." "No," I said quietly. "I sound like someone who finally listened." I saw Marcus pull into view then, his presence steady and unmistakable. He didn't rush, didn't posture. He walked up beside the gate like this was just another Tuesday. "Good morning," he said to them. "The homeowner has asked you to leave." Daniel spun toward him. "Who the hell are you?" "Marcus Reed," he replied. "Private security." Rachel's face drained slightly. "Security? Since when does our mother need security from us?" Marcus didn't answer that. He didn't need to. "This is your last warning," he said. "Leave now or I'll contact local authorities." Lena started crying, real tears this time, loud, performative. "Mom, please," she said, voice breaking. "This is going too far." I leaned closer to the intercom. "What went too far," I said, "was telling your mother she was needy for wanting to matter." Rachel's face hardened. "So this is revenge?" "No," I said. "This is consequence." They left angry, not quietly, not gracefully. Daniel kicked the gravel as he turned away. Rachel slammed her door. Lena didn't look back. I watched the cars disappear from the feed before setting the tablet down. Then I sat, and for the first time since Thomas died, I didn't feel like my home was waiting to be taken from me. That afternoon, Arthur Lowell called. I heard there may be tension, he said mildly. Word travels? They came by, I replied, uninvited. A pause, then do you want me to proceed? Yes, I said, send the letters. By evening, the certified envelopes were sealed, one for Rachel, one for Daniel, one for Lena. Each explained clearly and without emotion what had changed and why. The trust, the revised will, the security measures, the boundaries, and one final line they likely wouldn't expect. Reconciliation is possible through family mediation, not demands. I mailed them myself. Mrs. Helen Brooks came over later with soup she'd made too much of. I saw the cars, she said gently. I know, I replied. She looked at me for a long moment. You okay? I nodded. I am, I said. I finally am. That night my phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no apologies disguised as concern, just quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something that startled me with its simplicity. They thought showing up would restore control. What it actually did was prove I no longer needed it. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because when entitlement meets a locked gate, it doesn't walk away forever. It comes back louder, more desperate. And next time they wouldn't come asking, they'd come expecting, and I was already prepared for that. The letters arrived 3 days later. I didn't need to be told. I felt the shift before my phone ever lit up. When people realize certainty has replaced access, they react in one of two ways. They reflect or they retaliate. Rachel chose retaliation. Her call came just after noon. I let it ring once, twice, then I answered. What the hell did you do? She demanded, skipping every greeting she'd ever learned. I clarified things, I said. You disinherited us, Daniel's voice cut in, loud, furious. You went behind our backs. I went forward, I replied. Without you. Lena stayed quiet as usual. Rachel laughed, sharp and brittle. You think you can just rewrite history because you're angry? This has nothing to do with anger, I said calmly. It has to do with behavior. You're punishing us, Daniel snapped. No, I said. I'm protecting myself. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then Lena finally spoke, her voice thin and wounded. So that's it, we're nothing to you now. I closed my eyes briefly. You were everything to me, I said, for decades. That doesn't disappear, but access does when respect does. Rachel scoffed. This is manipulation, you're trying to control us with money. I almost smiled. No, I said, money was how you tried to control me. I simply removed it from the conversation. Daniel slammed something on his end. You're not well, we're calling Arthur, this won't stand. You're welcome to, I replied. He drafted the documents. That shut them up, not because they understood. Because they realized the ground had shifted without their permission. The call ended without resolution. No apologies, no accountability, just anger that didn't know where to land. That afternoon, Marcus called again. They've been parked down the street, he said. Not on your property, just watching. Thank you, I said. Document everything. I wasn't afraid, I was prepared. That evening I sat with Mrs. Helen Brooks on her porch as the sun dipped low. She stirred her tea slowly. Children don't like it when they lose leverage, she said quietly. No, I replied. They confuse leverage with love. She reached over and patted my hand. You're doing the right thing. I know, I said. I just wish knowing it didn't feel so lonely. Helen smiled gently. Lonely isn't the same as wrong. Later that night, Arthur emailed. They've contacted my office. Aggressive, threatening, I've responded formally. You're protected. I closed my laptop and exhaled. Thomas would have approved of how cleanly everything was unfolding. No shouting, no spectacle, just structure. But I knew my children well enough to understand something else. They weren't done. Entitled people rarely stop when told no. They escalate. The next morning, I received a message from Lena. Not a call, not a confrontation. A paragraph. Mom, I don't agree with everything Rachel and Daniel say, but you're being extreme. This could tear the family apart. Maybe we should talk alone, without lawyers, without security. I read it twice. Then I replied, I'm open to talking when accountability comes with it, not pressure. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No response. By evening, the escalation arrived exactly as Marcus predicted. A letter from Rachel's attorney, not Arthur, someone else, someone loud. Accusations of undue influence, claims of emotional manipulation, threats of contesting the will. I handed it to Arthur the next morning without comment. He skimmed it once, then smiled faintly. "This is bluster," he said. "They have no case." "I know," I replied. "What do you want to do?" "Nothing," I said. "Let them exhaust themselves." Arthur nodded. "That's usually how this ends." That night I stood in my living room and looked at the walls. Family photos once filled them, smiles frozen in time, moments that no longer matched reality. I took them down slowly, not angrily, carefully. I replaced them with my watercolor from class, a landscape of mountains, steady, unmoving. Something solid. As I stepped back, I realized something important. I wasn't erasing my children, I was reclaiming space. And I knew, without doubt, that the next time they showed up, it wouldn't be with voices raised or threats delivered through lawyers. It would be with something else, something quieter, something designed to pull at the part of me that still wanted to believe. And that was the moment I understood. The hardest test wasn't standing firm against anger, it was standing firm against guilt. And that test was coming, soon. Guilt arrives differently than anger. Anger announces itself, raises its voice, demands attention. Guilt is quieter, it knocks softly, wearing the face of memory. It came for me through Lena, she didn't call. She showed up, I saw her on the camera just after noon. Alone this time. No Rachel, no Daniel, no posturing. She stood at the gate with her arms folded, head down, the way she used to stand as a teenager when she wanted something but didn't want to ask outright. I didn't open the gate, I pressed the intercom. "Yes," her voice trembled slightly. "Mom, it's just me." "I know," I said. "I'm not here to argue," she continued quickly. I needed to see you." I let the silence stretch. Silence makes people honest when they're not used to it. "Lena," I said finally, "what do you want?" She exhaled. "I want my mother back." There it was, not accountability, not apology, nostalgia. "You never lost me," I replied. "You lost access? That's not fair," she said. "You changed everything without warning." "I warned you every time you didn't call back," I said. "Every time you stayed silent when I asked for care." Her shoulders slumped. "Rachel's furious, Daniel's talking about court." "I know," I said. "I don't want that," Lena whispered. "I don't want lawyers, I don't want security guards, I don't want to fight." "Then don't," I said. She looked up at the camera, eyes glassy. "They're saying you've been influenced, that someone's putting ideas in your head." I almost smiled. "Thomas taught me how to think," I said calmly. "Arthur helps me put it on paper. Marcus enforces boundaries, no one is controlling me." Lena swallowed. "They think you're doing this to hurt us." "I'm doing this so I don't disappear," I said. "There's a difference." She stood there for a long moment, hands twisting together. "I feel like I'm losing my family," she said softly. I closed my eyes. "You lost your family when you treated me like an inconvenience," I replied. "What you're feeling now is the consequence." Her voice cracked. "Can I come in?" Just for a minute, I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see her, because I knew how easily guilt could undo progress. "No," I said gently, "not like this." "Then how?" she asked. "Through a mediator," I said, with honesty. "With responsibility, not tears at the gate." She nodded slowly, defeated. "I'll tell them." She turned and walked back to her car without another word. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. That evening, Mrs. Helen Brooks knocked on my door with a small potted plant. "For the porch," she said, "something that grows slowly but lasts." I thanked her and set it near the door. Later, my phone buzzed, a group message from Rachel. "Lena tried to talk to you, you humiliated her." I didn't respond. Another message followed from Daniel. "This is elder abuse in reverse, you're manipulating us emotionally." I turned the phone face down, not because the words didn't sting, but because I recognized them for what they were: deflection. That night, Arthur emailed again. "They're preparing to escalate, filing intent to contest. It won't go anywhere, but they want pressure." I wrote back one line: "Let them." Marcus called shortly after. "I'll increase monitoring for the next week," he said, "just in case." "Thank you," I replied. When I went to bed, I didn't replay conversations, I replayed Thomas's voice. "If you give in to guilt without change, you teach people how to erase you." I woke the next morning knowing something important. Rachel and Daniel would never come alone. They needed witnesses, leverage, control. But Lena was struggling. And that made her dangerous in a different way, because when guilt fails, people try pity. and when pity fails, they try rewriting history. I had stood firm against anger. I had stood firm against guilt. There was only one thing left they could try, to show up like nothing had ever happened. And when that moment came, I knew exactly what I would do, because boundaries don't weaken with repetition. They sharpen. And the final test was almost here. Guilt arrives differently than anger. Anger announces itself, raises its voice, demands attention. Guilt is quieter. It knocks softly, wearing the face of memory. It came for me through Lena. She didn't call. She showed up. I saw her on the camera just after noon. Alone this time. No Rachel, no Daniel, no posturing. Just Lena standing at the gate with her arms folded, head slightly lowered, the same way she used to stand as a teenager when she wanted something but didn't want to say it out loud. I didn't open the gate. I pressed the intercom. Yes, her voice wavered. Mom, it's just me. I know, I said. I'm not here to argue, she rushed. I just needed to see you. I let the silence stretch. Silence makes people honest when they aren't prepared. What do you want, Lena? I asked calmly. She swallowed. I want my mother back. There it was, not accountability, not apology, nostalgia. You never lost me, I said. You lost access? That's not fair, she said quickly. You changed everything without warning. I warned you every time you didn't call back, I replied. Every time you stayed quiet when I asked for care. Her shoulders sagged. Rachel's furious, Daniel's talking about lawyers. I'm aware. I don't want that, she whispered. I don't want security, I don't want fighting, I don't want this family torn apart. Then don't tear it, I said gently. She looked up at the camera, eyes shining. They think someone's controlling you, that you've been influenced. Thomas taught me how to think, I said evenly. Arthur helps me protect myself. Marcus enforces boundaries. No one controls me, she hesitated. They think you're doing this to hurt us. I'm doing this so I don't disappear, I replied. There's a difference. Lena stood there for a long moment, hands twisting together. I feel like I'm losing my family, she said softly. You lost your family when you treated me like an inconvenience, I said. What you're feeling now is consequence. Her voice cracked. Can I come in just for a minute? I paused. Not from fear, from clarity? No, I said gently, not like this. Then how? She asked. Through mediation, I said. With honesty, with responsibility, not tears at the gate. She nodded slowly, defeated, then turned and walked back to her car without another word. I didn't feel strong, I felt steady. That evening, Mrs. Helen Brooks came by with a small potted plant. For your porch, she said, something that grows slowly but lasts. I thanked her and set it near the door. Later, my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel? Lena tried to talk to you, you humiliated her. I didn't reply. Another message followed from Daniel. This is emotional manipulation, you're abusing your power. I turned the phone face down. Not because it didn't sting, because I recognized deflection when I heard it. Arthur emailed that night. They're preparing to escalate, intent to contest. No legal footing, but they want pressure. I responded with one line, let them. Marcus called shortly after. I'll increase monitoring, he said, just in case. Thank you. When I went to bed, I didn't replay their voices, I replayed Thomas's. If you give in to guilt without change, you teach people how to erase you. I woke the next morning knowing something important. Rachel and Daniel would never come alone. They needed leverage, witnesses, control. But Lena was struggling. And that made her dangerous in a quieter way, because when guilt fails, people try pity. And when pity fails, they try rewriting history. I had stood firm against anger. I had stood firm against guilt. There was only one move left. They would show up like nothing had ever happened. And when they did, I would not argue. I would simply decide. Because boundaries don't weaken with repetition. They sharpen. And the final test was coming. They showed up on a Sunday, not angry, not pleading, smiling. That's how I knew this was the last move. I was in the living room mid-afternoon, sunlight spilling across the floor when Marcus's name appeared on my phone. They're here, he said. All three, calm, acting like nothing's wrong. I didn't rush. I set my book down, folded the page corner gently, and stood. When I opened the camera feed, the image was almost surreal. Rachel stood at the gate with a gift bag in her hand. Flowers, maybe. Daniel leaned casually against his truck, arms crossed but relaxed. Lena stood slightly behind them, hands clasped, eyes darting toward the house. They looked like a family arriving for brunch. They looked like the past. I pressed the intercom. Yes, Rachel's voice was warm, too warm. Mom, we just wanted to stop by, no drama, no arguments. We brought lunch. Daniel waved at the camera. We're good, we've all had time to think. Lena smiled softly, the same smile she used as a child when she wanted forgiveness without confession. I said nothing for a moment. Rachel filled the silence. It's Sunday, we thought maybe we could reset, erase, overwrite, pretend. I looked at them carefully, not as my children but as people. Who decided this? I asked. Rachel answered too quickly. We all did, Daniel nodded. Lena didn't speak, that told me everything. I appreciate the effort, I said calmly, but you're not coming in. The smiles froze. Rachel's tone shifted slightly. Evelyn, come on. This doesn't have to be like this. This is exactly how it has to be, I replied. Daniel stepped forward. We're trying here. No, I said, you're bypassing responsibility. Lena finally spoke, voice quiet. Mom, can we please just talk inside? I took a breath. This house is no longer a place where conflict is avoided by pretending, I said. If you want reconciliation, it happens with a mediator, with accountability. Not with sandwiches and smiles, Rachel scoffed. So that's it, you're choosing isolation over family? I shook my head slowly. I'm choosing truth over performance. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're really going to shut us out like this? I'm not shutting you out, I said. I'm setting conditions. Rachel laughed sharply. You sound like a lawyer. I sound like someone who learned, I replied. Silence settled over them. Then Rachel tried one last thing. You're going to regret this, she said softly. One day you'll be alone. I leaned closer to the intercom. I was alone, I said, while you were busy, while I was in the hospital. While I was told to stop calling, this isn't loneliness, this is peace. Daniel took a step back. Lena looked down. Rachel's smile vanished completely. Marcus's voice came through his radio behind them, calm and firm. Ma'am, sir, you've been asked to leave the property. Rachel turned sharply. This is unbelievable. No, I said, this is final. They didn't argue this time, they didn't shout. They left the way people do when they realize the door isn't just closed, it's locked from the inside. I watched the cars disappear down the street. Then I turned the camera off. That evening, I sat with Mrs. Helen Brooks on my porch as the sun went down. We didn't talk much. Finally, she said, you did what most people never find the courage to do. What's that? I asked. Choose self-respect over hope that hurts. I nodded. Later, Arthur called. They won't win, he said. They know it now. I know, I replied. Marcus checked in once more. All quiet. Thank you, I said. That night, I walked through my house slowly, not checking locks, not counting rooms, just feeling it. This was no longer a place waiting to be inherited. It was a place lived in. I sat at the dining table and opened Thomas's old notebook one last time. On the final page, I wrote a single line. They told me to live my own life. I finally did. I closed it. And for the first time in years, I didn't wonder if my children would call tomorrow, because I already had everything I needed. My dignity, my peace, my life. And if you're still here listening to my story, maybe it's because a part of it felt familiar. If someone in your life has told you to stop calling, to stop needing, to stop existing quietly for their convenience, know this. Choosing yourself is not cruelty, it's survival. If this story meant something to you, share where you're listening from in the comments. And if you believe quiet strength is the most powerful kind, stay with this channel. There are more stories like mine, stories where dignity finally wins.